Coming up, the QB showdown this week features Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady, and the Eagles are going to try to stay undefeated. This is Locked On Game to Game NFL.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NFL, local experts taking us from game to game in week 4 of the NFL season. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. The Bucs are hosting the Chiefs in primetime on Sunday night. Locked On Bucs knows Tom Brady and the offense is going to need a ton of help if they want to get a win in week 4 over Kansas City.
Will the real Bucs offense please show up? I'm David Harrison of the Locked On Bucs podcast. That's what the team, that's what the fans, and certainly everybody who will be in attendance or watching Sunday Night Football when the Tampa Bay Buccaneers host the Kansas City Chiefs, wherever that might be, are asking, will the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense finally show up? Each week, while the Buccaneers are 2-1, the offense has found a new and a more inventive way to try and defeat itself. Week 1 at Dallas, Tom Brady completed 18 of his 24 pass attempts for 212 yards, a touchdown and interception, but the offense just could not crack the end zone for the most part, keeping that game much closer than it needed to be. In week 2 in New Orleans, Tom Brady, not accurate, 18 of 34 and passing, only 190 yards, did throw a touchdown, but a 79.3 QBR and a lost fumble in a win over the New Orleans Saints. And then week 3 versus the Green Bay Packers, a much better Brady, 31 for 42, 271 yards. Finally, a QBR over 95, coming in 98.4, but fumbles lost by wide receivers Brashad Perryman and Russell Gage, and 3 sacks of Tom Brady from the Green Bay Packers not only kept that game closer than it needed to be, but resulted in the Buccaneers' first loss of the season. Will the Buccaneers offense finally get it together against Kansas City Chiefs this weekend? If they do, they come away with a win. For more on this game and everything Tampa Bay Buccaneers, follow James Jarko and myself on the Locked On Bucs podcast 5 days a week, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Both Cleveland and Atlanta haven't had a big problem scoring points so far this year, but their defense definitely needs to step it up. Could be the difference in this matchup as well. Locked On Falcons details what Atlanta needs to do to get a win on Sunday.
A fast start may hold the key to victory for the Falcons as they try to slow down the Browns' rushing attack in week 4. I'm Aaron Freeman, host of Locked On Falcons. The Browns currently rank atop the NFL in rushing this year, and very few teams have had success slowing them down in recent years. But the few that have often built early leads, forcing the Browns to abandon the run and throw the ball to get back into the game. The Browns have yet to be held to under 100 yards rushing in 2022, but defenses did accomplish this 6 times in 2021, and 5 of those 6 times occurred when the Browns' opponents were able to build a 10 or more point lead early in the game. So the Falcons' best defense might be a good offense if they hope to keep running back Nick Chubb and the Browns' running game in check this Sunday. For more coverage of this weekend's matchup, follow Locked On Falcons wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
An NFC East divisional matchup that could have a big impact for both of these teams. Dallas is looking to keep winning even without Dak behind center, and the Commanders are looking to avoid going 1-3. Locked On Commanders and Locked On Cowboys break down this upcoming game.
A lot of people may think this week's matchup for the Washington Commanders relies on Carson Wentz, but it's actually how little the Commanders have to rely on Carson Wentz that might make the difference. I'm David Harrison of the Locked On Commanders podcast, and this weekend, when the Commanders travel to face the Dallas Cowboys in their second straight NFC East divisional matchup, everybody's going to want to know if we're going to get good Carson Wentz or bad Carson Wentz after a 71 total quarterback rating against the Philadelphia Eagles last weekend helped torpedo their efforts against Philadelphia Eagles. With the Indianapolis Colts last year, typically when Carson came in with a below average QBR, he rebounded the next week with an average or even above average QBR. But throughout his entire career, when Carson Wentz led teams throw the ball more than 40 times, which has happened 27 times in his career, more than 40 times, that those teams are 6-20-1. So keeping the pass attempts down below the 40 throw mark will be the key for the Washington Commanders against the Dallas Cowboys as they go into Jerry's world, try to get off to a fast start and protect the lead by running the ball grinding the clock. For more on this matchup and everything Washington Commanders, check out my co-host Chris Russell and I on the Locked On Commanders podcast 5 days a week, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The key for the Dallas Cowboys this weekend against the Washington Commanders is rush, rush, rush. Hi, I'm Landon McCool with the Locked On Cowboys podcast, and this weekend against the Washington Commanders, the Cowboys need to avail themselves of all three rushes. They need to rush the football well like they did last week, where they were able to get equal touches between Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott and had a ton of success on the ground, which stabilized and balanced the offense for Cooper Rush to continue to play good football, especially on third downs where they struggled early on in the season, but they made marked improvement in this last week. They'll need to be better, even better against the Washington Commanders. And then on the defensive side, they need to get the pass rush onto Carson Wentz. Last week, they were damaging Daniel Jones' psyche with their pass rush, and they hope to do more of the same with Carson Wentz, who will give up the football, much like Daniel Jones normally does, if you continue to hit them. If they can continue to do those three things, rush, 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 they will have a victorious weekend this weekend against the Washington Commanders. For more on the NFL and on the Dallas Cowboys, make sure you check us on the Locked On Cowboys podcast. And we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Coming up, the pressure is on as the Cardinals visit Carolina. This is Locked On Game to Game NFL. Today's edition of Locked On Game to Game is brought to you by Brightco. We all kind of hate insurance, right? But Brightco has turned that whole experience around, especially when you want to insure the most important things that you have. I know I've misplaced my wedding rings before, and that is not something that you want to deal with, and you want to get rid of that stress if you can. For $5 a month, you get totally comprehensive coverage, and it won't take you more than 2 minutes to set up on your cell phone. You can check it out at bright.co/locked on. Welcome back to Locked On Game to Game NFL. I'm Kainani Stevens, and thank you for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Two teams in transition meet up as the Seahawks travel to Detroit to take on the Lions. Both of these teams struggling to really find their identities at this point. Our Locked On hosts go over what it will take to get a Week 4 win.
The Detroit Lions must stick to the ground game, run the football if they want to have success and beat the Seattle Seahawks. Coming up this Sunday, I'm Matt Derry, host of the Locked On Lions podcast. It's very, very simple. For the Lions to get to 2-2 and have success against Seattle this coming Sunday, Detroit must stick with the run game. Yes, DeAndre Swift likely not going to play Sunday with a shoulder injury, but the likes of Jamal Williams and Craig Reynolds and Justin Jackson must get plenty of touches against the Seattle defense that last week gave up to close to 160 yards rushing to the lowly Atlanta Falcons. Yes, Ben Johnson wants Jared Goff throwing the football, wants to get all of the weapons involved. But at home, trying to get to 2-2, the Lions have a superior offensive line to Seattle's defensive line. They must stick to the ground game to get this win. For more on your Detroit Lions and this weekend's big matchup with Seattle, check out the Locked On Lions podcast every Monday through Friday, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Giants and Bears meeting is likely going to be an ugly one, like many of the Bears games have been so far this season. Locked On Bears is looking for more of the same in New York.
The Chicago Bears will need to stick to the winning formula they've found as of late if they want to beat the New York Football Giants on the road on Sunday. I'm Lauren Cox from the Locked On Bears podcast. And the Chicago Bears have found ugly ways to win 2 out of their first 3 games, and it's looking like a similar matchup this week against the New York Giants. The Bears have found success running the ball incredibly effectively, not needing Justin Fields to pass all that much, and their defense has been able to come up with a key turnover here and there and a key stop when they need it the most in order for their offense to finish with the ball in their hands and the opportunity to win these games. The Giants' run defense has struggled as of late, so Khalil Herbert in the Bears' backfield should have another opportunity for a big game on the ground. And on the other side, the Giants have been running the ball well, and the Bears haven't been stopping the run that well. So I'm expecting another low-scoring back-and-forth game, and this Bears defense has found ways to just generate that one turnover to give them that one extra possession when they need it most, and that can be just enough to get another win and beat the New York Giants on Sunday. For more Chicago Bears analysis, make sure you check out the Locked On Bears podcast wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
The Jacksonville Jaguars are going to try to knock off the last undefeated team in the NFL when they take on the Philadelphia Eagles. Not going to be easy. Locked On Jags goes over what exactly is going to need to happen to pull off that upset.
Quarterback is key between the Philadelphia Eagles and Jacksonville Jaguars this Sunday at Lincoln Financial Field. I'm Louis DiBiase, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast. The key to a win for the Eagles on Sunday against the 2-1 Jaguars and former Super Bowl winning head coach Doug Peterson, for the Eagles to get to 4-0 for the first time in years, is simply Jalen Hurts needs to outperform Trevor Lawrence. Both of these young quarterbacks are taking over the NFL right now. They are two of, if not the two, hottest quarterbacks in football. You look at the Jaguars defense as well. They are the number one ranked defense against the run. Yes, it's going to be strength against strength. The Eagles' offensive line, Jalen Hurts, Miles Sanders, they're loaded on the ground. They're still going to get theirs, but Jalen Hurts needs to continue this hot streak through the air. And I think Trevor Lawrence is one of the best young quarterbacks in football. They need to go toe-to-toe with Doug Peterson and Lawrence on Sunday. I'm Louis DiBiase for Locked On Eagles.
When you are a coach on the hot seat, every single win matters. Carolina and Arizona certainly feeling the pressure in week 4. Locked On Panthers and Locked On Cardinals join us with a preview.
The Arizona Cardinals, once again, need to get a quick start on offense if they want to beat the Carolina Panthers for the first time since 2013. I'm Alex Clancy with Locked On Cardinals. I sound like a broken record. Kyler Murray, Cliff Kingsbury, and this offense has to get off to a start, not even a fast start, a start. They need to be awake for the first 2 quarters of an NFL game that they're playing in that they haven't done in the first 3 weeks. I say it flippantly, but I'm serious. The Cardinals have sleepwalked through the first half of the first 3 games of the 2022 NFL season like they won the Super Bowl last year. And it can't happen. You can't undervalue Jeremy Chin and this Carolina Panthers defense that will run roughshod all over this offensive line and make this offense very difficult to perform if the Cardinals don't have the right game plan when they play Carolina in the afternoon slate on Sunday. For more information, Monday through Friday on Arizona Cardinals, check me out on Locked On Cardinals. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube.
That's all for today on Locked On Game to Game NFL. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On NFL on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Also, check out your team's Locked On podcast as well. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.